A major part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Phase 4 has been about introducing new blood. Shankai and the Legend of the Ten Rings, 2021, shone the light on the greatest martial artist in the MCU. Eternals, 2021, expanded the franchise's horizons and showed us the bigger and godlike players going through an existential crisis. WandaVision, 2021, portrayed Monica Rambeau, Teyana Paris. Loki, 2021, revealed the next Thanos-level baddie, i.e., Kang, Jonathan Majors. Black Widow, 2021, and Hawkeye, 2021, opened the door for Kate Bishop, Haley Steinfeld, and Yelena Florence Pugh. And with Disney Plus' latest offering, Moon Knight, Oscar Isaac has made his entrance. The first episode of Moon Knight is directed by Mohammed Diab and written by Jeremy Slater. It features Arthur Harrow, Ethan Hawke, Stephen Grant, Marc Spector, Moon Knight, Oscar Isaac, and Layla El Fagli, Michael Amoy. Understanding whether a story is set after Thanos, Josh Brolin, Snap and Hulk's Mark Ruffalo reversal, also known as the blip, has become a big thing in the Phase 4 stories. Although it's not explicitly stated here, it looks like Moon Knight, 2022, is set in the post-blip world. Some eagle-eyed fans have pointed out posters for the Global Repatriation Council, GRC, an organization that seeks to rehabilitate people impacted by the blip. Also, unlike most MCU movies and shows, this is a globe-trotting adventure, starting from London. We all are waiting for this momentum. Let's begin. In episode 1 of Marvel Studios' Moon Knight, The Goldfish Problem, mild-mannered gift shop British employee Stephen Grant becomes plagued with blackouts and memories of a life somehow separate from his mundane one. Unfortunately for Stephen, what he initially believes are dreams are not that, given that he wakes up in unknown areas feeling like his body was hit by a bus. Event log: Stephen Grant wakes up and undoes his makeshift sleep restraints before checking in on his one-fin goldfish friend, Gus, while leaving a voicemail for his mom. He's been sleeping terribly, and what terrible luck, he nearly misses the bus, making himself late to work once again. Only the worthy shall pass. Seeing a child mistake the Great Pyramid of Giza for the rubbish dump, Stephen takes the opportunity to enlighten her with some historical ancient Egyptian tidbits. In the process of mummification, most of the organs would be removed, except for the heart. The ancient Egyptians believed the heart was necessary in order to be judged in the underworld. Only the worthy were permitted to pass into the field of reeds. Unfortunately for Stephen, his boss Donna isn't impressed. He's never going to be promoted to tour guide as he can't even fulfill his current duties at the gift shop. No matter, turns out he has a date with a colleague tomorrow night, even if he doesn't remember setting it up. What's a vegan going to eat at a steakhouse? Obviously, salad or bread, Donna. Will you accept your scales regardless of the outcome? As Stephen explains to his friend, Crawley the street performer, his body is restless. It's why he works so hard to stay awake each night. However, this all would certainly be a red flag for any potential girlfriends, so he'd best nip all of this in the bud. Back home, Stephen listens to a meditation app, trying to stay awake with some puzzles and some light reading on Egyptology and the Ennead. Suddenly, Stephen wakes up outside somewhere in the Alps with a broken jaw. Unsure of how he got here, a disembodied voice booms out of nowhere, telling him to go back to sleep and surrender the body to Marc. Stephen finds an intricately carved golden scarab beetle in his pockets. Before he can make sense of anything, a group of men with guns begin to pursue him towards an alpine village. He comes across a congregation forming around a mysterious man and does his best to blend in. Moon Knight Stephen Grant, Oscar Isaac, and Arthur Harrow, Ethan Hawke the man, Arthur Harrow, exclaims it's their mission to make Earth as much like heaven as possible. He seeks volunteers who offer their souls for judgment to serve their goddess Ammit before she wakes. As volunteers make their way up, Harrow places his crocodile cane into their palm as his scales tattoo begins to shift on his skin. One believer is deemed a good man as decreed by the scales, however, another follower is deemed unworthy. The scales see everything. Unfortunately for her, she won't live to see the world they make together as her soul is taken. Harrow spots Stephen in the crowd. He wants the mercenary to return the scarab. Stephen is shocked. He's no mercenary, just a museum clerk from London. Stephen can't control his body from acting on its own, and it doesn't want to give Harrow the Scarab. As he blacks out, he is confused as to how his fists are bloody with bodies of injured men surrounding him. He blacks out again and wakes up behind the wheel, caught in the middle of dangerous van chase in the Alps. Stephen is startled awake in bed. His restraints are still on, and his door tape and circle of sand around his bed are undisturbed. Phew, it was all just a dream. The fish is wrong. The time is wrong. No, you're not quite right. Stephen is all out of sorts. Gus suddenly has two fins. Waiting at the steakhouse, Stephen learns from his angry date that he stood her up days ago. It's not Friday as he believed it to be, it's Sunday. Dejected and confused as to the loss in time, Stephen discovers scratches on his floor and a loose panel on his ceiling. There, Stephen finds a key as well as a cell phone, both items that do not belong to him. Powering up the cell phone, Stephen discovers over 50 missed calls from a woman named Layla. With the phone powered on, Stephen receives an incoming call from Layla, who is astonished he's alive. She's been texting and calling him for months. Stephen explains he just discovered this phone in the flat. She must have confused him with someone else. She's aggravated. Why does Marc have an accent? Stephen has no idea why she just called him Marc, and before he can get any more answers, she hangs up the phone. A voice suddenly tells Stephen he needs to stop, otherwise he's going to get himself in trouble. He catches his reflection not mirroring himself in the bathroom. Just then, the lights in his flat begin to flicker as things begin to violently fly across the room. Running out of his flat and down the hall, Stephen spots a ghastly, shrouded figure with a large beak menacingly approaching him in the elevator. Screaming, Stephen jolts awake on a crowded bus. He realizes it's not a dream as he spots the creature on the street and Harrow on the bus. The world's first Boogeyman. At the museum, Stephen pleads with JB to not admit anyone into the museum as he's being followed, a request the security guard finds absolutely absurd as they're a public museum. Arthur Harrow is astonished to find Stephen at the museum. He thought Stephen Grant was an alias. Unfortunately for Stephen, it appears several of his colleagues at the museum are acolytes of Harrow. Stephen swears he doesn't have the zealot Scarab beetle. Wrong, it's not his scarab, it belongs to the Egyptian deity Ammit. Harrow explains the only people who should fear Ammit are evildoers. She had grown weary of waiting for sinners to commit their crimes before punishing them. After all, her judgment surveys their entire lives, past, present, and future. She not only knows what they've done, but also what they will do. She just wants to rid the world of evil, but she was betrayed by her insolent fellow gods and her own avatar. Harrow reasons with Stephen that he understands how maddening it is to have that relentless voice in his head. As he grasps Stephen's hands, the scales of judgment on his forearm are undecided on Stephen as the scales continue to shift from side to side. Harrow confirms there is chaos within Stephen. As he closes out his shift at the museum, Stephen is aggressively pursued by a beastly jackal. Over the museum speakers, Harrow demands Stephen relinquish the scarab or he'll be torn apart. As he seeks refuge in the men's restroom, with the jackal on the other side, his reflection pleads that he can save them, as long as he doesn't fight him. Stephen does not believe this is real, but his reflection assures him he's real. This is real. Giving up control of his body, he's suddenly enveloped in ceremonial armor, taking control of the situation and defeating the monstrous creature. Arthur Harrow and the search for Ammit Scarab. Moon Knight probably has one of the gnarliest openings Marvel fans have seen in the franchise in a long time. It shows Hawk's Harrow doing some kind of ritual by putting his hands on a piece of cloth. His hand has a tattoo of a weighing scale whose beams are the shape of crocodile heads. Then he proceeds to put a glass on that cloth, pours some liquid in it, drinks it, covers it with the cloth, smashes it with his cane, which also has two crocodile heads on it, puts the shards of that glass in his slippers, wears them, and just walks away. Later on, it's revealed that the crocodile symbol is connected to the god that Harrow worships, example, Ammit. Now, there's a being in the Marvel comics called Ammit or Ammit, inspired by an actual demoness or goddess in ancient Egyptian religion. In the comics, she's known to be the eater of the dead, devouring those judged by Anubis by putting a mortal soul on a balance scale against the feather of Maat, the goddess of order. There's more to her, but it'll spoil things. So, let's keep it at that. Later on, in the show, we see that Harrow has a cult-like following in a town where Grant finds himself. Harrow is seen spewing religious propaganda about making the earth more like heaven. But propaganda turns into horror when he weighs the souls of his followers, and an old lady dies for the sins she has committed in the past, or will commit in the future. It's quite possible that Harrow is acting as a conduit for Ammit and collecting souls for her to power up. Or maybe there's no Ammit at all, and he's collecting souls to stay forever young. Either way, he's desperate as he aggressively goes after Grant to get the Scarab that he possesses. Stephen Grant, Marc Spector, and the fight for control. We meet Stephen Grant waking up in what's apparently his apartment, with his leg tied to a wooden pole, sand around his bed to keep track of his movements, and living with a one-finned fish named Gus. He works in the gift section of the National Art Gallery, despite having in-depth knowledge of Egyptian history, spewing random trivia about Egyptian death rituals and goddess Toret whenever he gets the chance. He is bullied by his immediate superior, Donna, Lucy Thackeray, for constantly being late and trying to be the tour guide when he's not. His best friend is a living statue, to whom he complains about not remembering how he reserved a date, thereby hinting at his unreliable memory. Grant is seen trying to stay awake because he is aware that he loses control of his body when he goes to sleep by reading about Ennead, the meeting of the gods of Egypt that hail celestial Heliopolis. It is a pocket dimension that connects with Earth through an interdimensional gateway hidden in Egypt. But before we get to know more about that, Grant finds himself in a field in a different country altogether, being chased by gun-toting mercenaries. It's there that we hear Khonshu, F. Murray Abraham, for the first time, requesting Grant to surrender his body to Marc and take care of the Scarab that Harrow is after. While escaping Harrow's henchmen, we not only get to see Grant black out in real time, but also the kind of damage Marc Spector is capable of doing. But his blood-ridden adventure is cut short as Grant wakes up in his apartment, tied to his bed, with no footprints on the sand, and the tape still intact on his door. Grant feels relieved, thinking it is nothing but a dream. However, eventually, he finds out that a couple of days have passed, Gus has 2 fins, maybe Spector has replaced them, and he has missed his date. Additionally, he makes contact with Layla, and it's hinted that he has lived a life as Spector, who has been covering up his tracks to convince Grant that he doesn't move out at night. Who takes over Stephen Grant's body? In the final few minutes of Moon Knight, after another jump in space and time, Grant realizes that everything that happened in and around that's a guess, village with Harrow, wasn't a figment of his imagination. He did, in fact, kill a bunch of goons, narrowly escaped a bunch of falling logs, and is now being followed by Harrow. So, he tries to warn the security guard to not let any dodgy people in. But he finds himself face to face with Harrow, who has covert operatives of his cult spread all across the museum, and requests Grant to give up Ammit's Scarab, while giving him a little mythology lesson about Ammit's powers. Harrow lets him go, temporarily, after finding out that there's chaos, as in the chaos magic that Scarlet Witch possesses, probably, in Grant. While on his way out of the museum, Grant hears a dog-like sound and follows it. There we get yet another indication that whoever isn't in control of the body can operate somewhat freely via reflective surfaces as Grant moves forward, but his reflection, Spector, stays back to notice what the dog-like sound is coming out of. And it's a demon resembling Anubis that Harrow has unleashed upon Grant. Things do get particularly hairy before Grant manages to make his way into a bathroom and lock himself in. As Anubis tries to claw his way into the bathroom, Spector confronts Grant through the reflections and gives him the pep talk he needs to relinquish control over the body and let Spector do his thing. After a lot of persuasion, Grant finally lets go of the body, and Spector takes over to finally reveal the titular Moon Knight in all his glory. Well, we see part of it, and Iab makes us think that Anubis got him mid-transformation. But when it cuts to a shot from the hallway, we see a sink fly out, followed by Anubis, who then gets pulled back in and punched to Kingdom Come by Moon Knight. And then he dramatically walks into the camera, thereby establishing the fact that Spector is the one capable of summoning the Moon Knight suit, while Grant isn't that adept at doing the same. Now, where does the suit come from? What does the suit have to do with Khonshu? What is Marc Spector's mission? What's the role of the Scarab? What will happen if Harrow gets it? To get the answers to all those questions, we'll have to wait for Moon Knight episode 2. This is the end of episode 1. What's your thought about it? Share with us in the comments box, and let's wait for the next episode, which launch on April 6th.